Um, Here we go. I am going to turn it over to Shelly, who's going to take us back to India. And another wonderful, wonderful film I actually saw this afternoon. So it's fresh in my mind. And Shelly, you're the best, and we are the luckiest to have you. So
Oh,
take it away. Thank you.
thank you so much, Marilyn. I appreciate it. And good evening, everybody. It's nice to see you all. This evening's film, The Pool, is from 2007. The director's name, even though the film is from India, his name is Chris Smith. He's a documentary filmmaker, and this was his first feature film back in 2007 after winning awards for his previous documentaries. The film was co-written by the director and a gentleman by the name of Randy Russell, who is an author who wrote The Pool as an American short story set in Iowa. The director had previously worked in Go on a documentary where the film is set, and he felt he wanted to make the story universal. He wanted to take it out of America and take a different point of view on it in terms of its poverty, in terms of, where it was taking place. And he felt the story could be well adapted to the world he experienced there. It's because of his experiences there that he did it that way. He also turns it, as I said, into a universal story. Goa, which is located in West India, is the region known as Konkanit on the Arabian Sea coast, is India's richest state, with a per capita GDP of 2.5 times that of India as a whole. And which is interesting because of what we see in the film, these two young boys. The film itself has a lyricism and a humanism of the director who brought Indian cinema into the modern world. For those of you who are familiar with Satyajit Ray, he imbued his films with the simple strength and beauty of the great Italian neorealists during the early 50s and late 40s. He had a great documentarian's eye for telling detail and the feeling of captured reality. His first films were back in the early 50s entitled the Apu Trilogy. If you ever happen to see it on Amazon or wherever, I think Max may even have it. It's a wonderful story of a young boy, and we watch him grow up into manhood over 3 films. But in those 3 films, it is the story of India itself. Remarkable achievement, which was awarded at Cannes as well as around the world. But anyway, getting back to this film, we first meet a young man, Venkatesh, and he's going through his daily routine as a hotel cleaner. He seems to get along with his coworker, who jokes with him and reads to him later about gardening because Venkatesh doesn't read. We also see that Venkatesh gets him into trouble and eventually gets him fired over an incident caused by Venkatesh. We later learn that he sends his scant earnings to his mother and siblings in the countryside, who he visits from time to time. And it does not seem, looking at him and his early experiences, that there's much in the way of a future for a young man like this. His only friend seems to be Jankir. Jankir is an 11-year-old who works and lives in a nearby restaurant. As we see later, he sleeps on a table or on the floor of the restaurant. They share their dreams and their little schemes for a better life together. They go out and they try to make extra money selling plastic bags on the street. Much to their dismay, the plastic bags are banned in the city later on. So they've lost that small income. It's interesting, though, to see when they go to the home of someone, I think it's Jankir's boss, and he's feeding the fish, and he expresses his dream to one day build houses like this, to become an engineer. So there is hope in their minds. There is the idea that he'll become something. But it is when he stops to sit, when Venkatesh stops to sit in a tree and marvel at the luxuriant garden and swimming pool just over a wall, it is his inquisitiveness, excuse me, about who lives in that house, about the world around him, and his curiosity about how he will eventually get over that wall that provides the impetus for the story. Like Satyajit Ray, he reflects man's ability to show people from the bottom rung of the ladder to have real dignity and to express intelligence. As the film progresses, it focuses on the gulf between the rich and the poor, sharing its insights, observations, its poignancy, and truth in a deceptively simple narrative. Working in Hindi with young actors and in a country obviously not his own, Smith nevertheless creates an incisive portrait that will take place on a global stage. Venkatesh is anything if not resourceful. He follows Nana, the homeowner, who invites him in. He grows friendly with Nana's daughter, Aisha, who we see at first as angry and rebellious with her father, as she softens and accompanies the two on their escapades. While the social and economic divide is too much to give Venkatesh or Jankir much of a chance with Aisha, they nevertheless develop a charming friendship. They walk around, they go on a boat ride with the three of them go on a boat ride. They visit an abandoned fort. When the three are just relaxing and being together, they're like young kids enjoying themselves. And there's no consciousness of class between them. However, Venkatesh, being somewhat of a fabulist, I think, tells several personal stories along the way, some seeming unbelievable, the scariest of which recounts his kidnapping by a New Zealand tourist who, intending to take him overseas as a servant, held him captive for 3 days until he escaped. It seems hard to believe, but nevertheless, and the gap between them widens when Aisha refuses their offering of a cup of chai or some papadums at a vendor stand, and especially when the two boys bicker in front of her during a hike, and she sullenly calls them children and stomps off. But it is through Venkatesh's interchanges with Nana, and finally Aisha's outburst of who leaves a 5-year-old with a young child, that we learn about the rift between he and Aisha, between Nana and Aisha, and her guilt over how his son drowned in the film, explaining why he only sits and stares at the pool, never venturing in. And when Venkatesh hears Nana's lesson about the rupees, about the 100 rupees, we will eventually see how he understood what a selfless act can lead to. On his visit home, we see the poverty Venkatesh comes from, but we also see how his mother impresses his responsibilities on him now that his sister will be leaving in an arranged marriage. We see their interchange. Will you visit me? Will I see you again? We see the sadness. We also see little hints of what Venkatesh has learned, how he tends to the flowers and the things at his home. And when he returns, he's offered the chance to rise above what he would ordinarily be denied by his status. He seems convinced that he will go. But when Jankir expresses his feelings about losing his only friend, it has an effect on Venkatesh. We have seen how their poverty can trap its victims into a kind of eternal childhood, and how psychologically it can be more comfortable to stay put than to move forward. Although Venkatesh is 7 years older than his sidekick, emotionally they seem the same age. And seizing an opportunity here for Venkatesh would mean growing up and growing out, but growing pains can be excruciating. At first, the pool suggests this will wind up becoming an inspirational fable in which a selfless older man rescues a youth from the streets. But just when you expect the film to turn into a predictable, rose-colored Valentine to opportunity and hope, it goes to a deeper, more ambiguous place. Contemplating poverty from Venkatesh's perspective, it understands that his pursuit of upward mobility will require a terrifying leap of faith. And the story of the 100 rupees has had that desired effect. Through that realization, the gift he gives to Jankir will be returned in kind. 20-year-old Venkatesh Chavan was seen by the director. This is interesting how this film was cast. I have to tell you that 3 days prior to the production of the film, the cast that they originally had in place, which were actors, had all dropped out. The young man that they hired to play Venkatesh had gone off to Mumbai to buy clothes and never returned. And the young girl who was supposed to be in it, who lived in Goa, her parents denied her going because they said she can't take off from school. And they hadn't yet found Jankir, but the man who was supposed to play the father had also dropped out of the film. And so they were left 3 days before trying to put this together. Anyway, the 20-year-old who played Venkatesh, and his name is Venkatesh Chavan, was seen by the director selling scrap with his family in the town of Vasco in Goa. They were poverty-stricken. They were working on the streets. And Smith spotted him with his parents, and as they agreed, they gave him permission. He said, I have to get permission to do this. They agreed, they gave him permission, and that's his mother and sister also in the film. When he goes home, those are his real mother and sister playing that role, playing those roles. Jangir was selected, who was selected to play the 11-year-old character, was also found working as an employee in that bar restaurant. The two of them, I hate to say this, but the two of them received compensation of 60,000 rupees for their roles. Now, when I translate 60,000 rupees, don't get too excited. It translates to $720. But you have to understand, for two boys like that, it was a fortune. It was a fortune. And, Nana Patekar, who plays Nana, they were both, he and the one who plays his daughter also use their own names. He is a highly respected actor in India, and especially Mumbai. He made his acting debut in the early 70s. He's had a lot of roles. He's played evil, he's played good. Anyway, he's been nominated for multiple awards. He's won multiple awards. He's very controversial. He's known for his different acting style, which is very natural, and how he uses dialogue and how he delivers it, especially in the Indian languages. He is sometimes regarded as the Morgan Freeman of Bollywood. And rounding out the cast, Aisha Mohan, as Aisha, had already worked in film prior to this when she was brought in at the last minute. And she's gone on to act in several other films, but she also works peripherally in the movie business. So you have that. Now, the challenge here was that Venkatesh and Jankir, the real Venkatesh and Jankir, they didn't read or write when they got these roles. They had no education. They couldn't read or write. And because they couldn't read, they couldn't really prepare their scenes in advance. So Smith said they had to get to a location and then rehearse on the spot until they got the idea of the scene. Then they would shoot it. Another added complication was the language issue. Neither of the boys spoke English, so it was difficult to convey detailed direction quickly, and it could easily get translated the wrong way, which it sometimes did. So it was equally challenging. And the fact that the film was being shot in Hindi, which wasn't their first language of either of the boys, they were being directed in a language they didn't understand and having to shoot complicated dialogue in dialogue scenes in a language that wasn't their first language. So overall, you can imagine the difficulties, and the accomplishment in the film. But overall, he said they were great. They quickly grasped what was and wasn't working and continued to grow into better actors throughout the shoot. Now, I can't tell you what's happened to them since. As far as I know, they didn't go back to acting. And I don't know. I was hoping to read that they sent them to school, but I didn't hear anything about it and couldn't find anything about it. Many of the stories in the film, by the way, were taken directly from their lives. He adapted, not only did he used the structure of the story, but he adapted some of the stories in the film from their own lives. And he wisely avoided imposing his preconceived notions of how life is there for them. That sense of balance and proportion is what gives the pool a special resonance. Spoken in Hindi, a language neither he nor the boys spoke, with English subtitles, the pool is certainly rich in detail and feels completely natural, as if it is unfolding right before our eyes, with the camera merely following these characters around to see what would happen next. I mean, we have no idea, how this film is going to work out, and it does have a certain documentary feel in watching them on the streets, watching them at night, and their relationship to each other. And Jank here is naturally the more jocular of the two. I love how he expresses his feelings when he knows Venkatesh is going to leave. He says, all right, you'll send me a postcard and you'll let me know how you're doing. I mean, he's laying on the guilt. I love it. It really, gets to you. But that last moment in the film, and I thought it was a very quietly powerful ending when we realize not only has he given Jank here this chance, but he also reminds Jank here, I've given you my name, because he has to go to school as Venkatesh. And how long are they going to pull this off with Nana is going to be the big question. But if it works out, and knowing Jank here, he'll teach Venkatesh at night. So one goes to day school and one goes to night school. By the time Nana comes back, the two of them will run circles around him, hopefully. So I thought this was a fabulous film. I thought it was a fabulous adaptation of his story and such an interesting backstory as well, which makes that. And the cinematography I thought was wonderful. It really covered a lot of ground. And there was symbolism in the film. When I love, there's a special scene when they're digging up the dead flowers and the roots in front of when Nana tells him, he reveals the darkness in his life. He walks by, if you notice, he walks by an open area that fades off into blackness, and it looks like an abyss. It's the abyss in which Nana has consigned himself since the death of his son, and we feel that. And there is the story itself that he tells tells Venkatesh, and then at the end, I love it when he takes the top, which probably belonged to his son, and he spins it, holds it in his hand, and puts it on the top of the car as if he's passing it off to him. You know, this is the act he would have done for his son, and now he does it for a surrogate. There is a sense of accomplishment in the film. So there's my take on it. And now I'd love to have you come into it and let me know how you felt about the film, you know, how you liked it, how you didn't like it, or whatever. So I'd like to see some hands. Naturally, I only see 3 or 4 people by their faces, so I can't chastise most of you because all I see is your names. Okay. Go ahead, Karen. Thank you.
Okay, a couple of things that really stuck with me was the what he says to what Nana says to Venkir. He says when he says he's going to have a really good garden, he says, "I'd rather have a good man than a good garden," and I think he would really fill that. You know, he would fill that desire. The other thing I really liked, just because I like flowers, but when you're talking about the cinematography, is the that patch of sunflowers that they had, which I thought was beautiful. Yeah. So anyway, that's a couple of things.
That's terrific. That's plenty. It's yes, that is a big insight into the film.
Mhm.
Okay. Who's next? Do I see any hands? Okay, Jackie, what?
You saw me trying to find the hand, didn't you? It's like, where is that stupid thing? We actually, both of us, and Larry will say too, didn't get quite as much out of it as you did. I did think the cinematography was fantastic. I agree, Karen, I loved the sunflowers. The ending actually made the movie worthwhile, I thought, because it made it seem or made him understand that we really are all in this together, and that by in the giving you are getting so much. And so I thought that kind of tied all the rest of the time together.
Yeah, no, that's great. And as I always say, you know, it's not so much of an ending as it is a beginning. You know, it's the film has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, but not necessarily in that order. So, you know, it is a beginning. It's a new beginning for these boys, which is terrific. And I really, you know, if a film can give you an ending like that, it makes the journey that much more worthwhile. I mean, it really, really does. So I'm glad it redeemed itself in your eyes. Who's next? Okay, I have to call on the usual suspects. Oh, Marilyn, go ahead.
One of the things that surprised me was that it was an American who was able to do this. And again, and Shelley discussed it with you before, and Rachel, we've discussed this whole idea also, that if he hadn't, I think he chose India brilliantly, but putting this one in and anywhere in the United States would never, I think, have given us the effect that it had coming out of India. Now, he might have picked any other place. I think he was brilliant choosing the location, and how he did it was because it's sort of not what the story is, it's a universal story. But the way that he told it with the environment that he was in, I think that would took it to the next level.
I agree with you 100%. I think it would be hard, first of all, to project that kind of illiteracy and poverty in America. Certainly, the poverty you could, but the illiteracy of young boys like that, you know, that they couldn't read at all, or, you know, because in our country, hopefully, you know, everybody goes to school at least at some point. And it might, you know, it would really, you would really have to find a place, even if it's Iowa. You know, it's the farmland of America, but you can understand possibly if the story was set in a different time, it might work better as an American
this was
story.
still Bombay. This was not Mumbai, so it had to go back. But even so, now somewhere I read that Venkatesh they were offered school. He chose not to go to school because he had to go to work to send money home to his mother. So I don't really know what schooling would even have been available to him.
Yeah, that's the question. I mean, I think it's this is, even though it's and the interesting contradiction is this is the richest part of India, and yet this is, how they had to live.
They had no truant officers coming to the house.
Yeah, well, they were also from the countryside, so
yeah.
they were sort of migrants in the city.
Yeah, but even in the countryside of Iowa, this would never be translated like that.
Exactly. Thank you, Marilyn. Okay, talking of usual suspects. Okay, Linda, go ahead. Wait, you gotta unmute, Linda.
Okay. This one was different because usually when you see the ones from India, they always show more of the slum type thing and all. And they really showed you, wide open spaces. They had the park where the girl was reading, it was like you said, a nicer area. But yet 2 young boys like that, especially the one that was so young, were just making it all on their own and seemed to be doing it. They were clean, they were, well dressed, they were taking their, they just made a life. So it was like a very inspiring, type thing for children to be so resilient and get along and everything. But in the beginning of it, though, when he was stalking the girl and just doing all that spying and everything, I thought it kind of bordered on creepy, So I was just keep waiting for disaster to happen. So I was happier when it evolved into such a nice, charming story, and especially the ending. So I did like it in the end, but I was not all that crazy about the middle part because it just seemed like this is not going to go anywhere. He's going to get caught, disaster is going to be done, and there would be nothing good to come out of it.
Yeah, that's the surprise. I mean, and that's really what makes the film work.
Right. And it wasn't just the surprise at the end, it was the surprise that he became friends with the daughter, and that every thing was just going so swimmingly for the for these 2 kids that didn't have anything, and
yeah, I mean,
so it wasn't as what do you call it, desperate a story that so you often get.
No, and I mean, that's really
nobody
what makes
bothered them or robbed them or or abused them in any manner, but it was such a focused story. You didn't have any other characters much come in, or it was just right there with their relationship. But I liked it. I thought it was a good film.
Good. Yeah, well, that's really, how he had to maintain control because of what he had to do with these characters,
right?
To focus. But also, it was a story where, even though they did dress well and they had this, they were still caught up in this grip of status, that they weren't going to rise. There was really no opportunity for them beyond what they were doing. He even the one that he wound up getting, that guy wound up getting fired. He read to him, but he got fired from that job. What's going to happen to him now? You can't start if you start to think about this, but there is this trap that they're in, and here because of his diligence in following everybody and following the girl and following Nana. Especially, which does look like stalking at one point, but then you realize what it is, and his ability to do that and ingratiating himself with Nana really, turns everything around. And it's a story of humanity. That's humanity. And it's also when you said, this is not the usual Indian film. No, we don't hear a song in the middle. We don't see any dancing. We don't see, this is not a Bollywood film. It's a film about India.
I wasn't talking about Bollywood, but what was that one that was real popular a number of years ago? Slumdog Millionaire.
Slum Bombay.
Yeah, where they just showed all the, the poverty in the slum.
The Slum Bombay.
The horror of it.
About the young boy. Yeah.
Yeah. So this was more of a like I said, just a small portion of a life there without trying to bring in the whole of India.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. It wasn't
It was a relationship.
a dreadful film. It wasn't a dreadful film. It wasn't a film, you know, steeped in tragedy, which those films could be.
Right.
But this leans more to what I was talking about at the beginning by films by Satyajit Ray. This would have been right out of his playbook, because his films, although they end on ambiguities, they really show the ability of people, you know, to overcome obstacles in their lives, which is what's interesting. And that's what this was. This was just that. Thank you, Linda. Rachel?
Okay, the other usual suspect.
Right.
For me, this movie meandered a little too much for me. It was a little too slow for me. I loved the mess that it brought, but to get to that place, it took a while. And there were parts that I did really enjoy with the conversation that the father had with that boy, you know, and also the symbolism of the pool. To one person, the pool is tragedy. To the other person, it's a sign of hope. And he wants to swim in that pool because he thinks his life will change from this. And it's just that idea of it. So in a character study way, it was interesting, but I also felt it meandered a little too much for me. But
yeah, it's also, yes, the pool is hope for him, but it's also the idea of the symbolism of the water itself. You know, that in this case, water was death, and in his case, water becomes life. It's offering him a chance at a new life. And at the end, when he stands there, I think he realizes that the pool was just a means to an end. It wasn't really, you know, he found there was more to that than just the pool, just wanting that desire to get into that pool. Now he's going to be in the pool of life. It's a whole different, you know, set of circumstances, but, you know, just, and as far as the meandering, you know, sometimes in a film, a director feels you have to see the repetitiveness of what the characters are doing, and which sort of puts us in their place. I mean, he's constantly walking. At the beginning, we see him walking one way, then another. He's picking up the dry cleaning. He's got to walk wherever he goes. Even when he goes home, he's walking. You know, we see this, you know, we constantly see him from the back, you know, where is he going? You know, we have to follow that trail, which I think is part of what he's doing as well. And don't forget, the director has a hard time because of the language, because of the translating to them, that he doesn't want to do too much dialogue with them and get them to just do some action that he can fill in with. Otherwise, it would be a short. I mean, you know, you got to be careful. So that's why. Jackie.
I just wanted to pop back in and say, honestly, I know we're all about the foreign films in this group, but I disagree 100% that there's no place else that it could have been filmed. I think India is staggeringly poor, but I think anybody who has traveled, even in this country, in the United States, in the swamps of Louisiana and the mountains of Arkansas and the Delta of Mississippi and the Appalachia, the poverty and what people have to do to exist is staggering. And we just don't get it because we have so much. So while I was glad it was set in India, I don't agree that it couldn't have been set anyplace else.
Well, it would have, well, remember the in the literature it's set in Iowa, but it would be, you have to think of the structure of the film. It's really more the structure of his film, his translation of the novel, in a sense, because in Appalachia, or in other parts of the South or even the West, where there is that extreme poverty, you're not going to find houses like what Nana had. You're not going to find the state sitting next to, you know, with these people in poverty. You do have it in, in certain areas, but they're separated. They're separated to where he wouldn't have access to a place like this. I'm not saying it wouldn't exist, but in this day and age, we might feel how are you going to, equivocate this kind of situation where somebody like that would now, given a young illiterate man steeped in poverty, but that much poverty, who is 18, 19 years old, to me, to tell it here would be much more of almost an immigrant story or migrant story, working on an estate and manages to ingratiate himself with the owner, and then it becomes that kind of story. But remember what he's setting up here, these two friends and this whole idea. Now, I didn't read the short story, so I don't know how much he took from that. And the story did win prizes, so I imagine the story is a little different in its telling to make it more American. But this could take place. I'm not saying it can't. It could take place anywhere outside, even outside the United States. I think it's a universal story, without question. I think we have to take our heads out, and I think that's what he was maybe trying to do, is to take our heads out of our own place and see another part of the world and how this exists and what can happen. That it's a human story. I think the humanity is clearly there. I think, if we could see it maybe in Africa, we could see it in Europe, we could see it in China, we could see it in places where this kind of poverty does exist. And I know it exists here, but we have I think we have more of a structure that, even though it exists, we're trying, and we have been trying to deal with it more here in our country, with teachers, and we see it. We see it in our stories and films here, with teachers who go into these poverty areas. There was what was it, Conrack, and there was some great stories about mostly teachers going into those areas. But it is about education in its subtle way. It's about education and what these two will get, but it's also the education he gets from Nana in the film, that he's getting from this wise man, so to speak. But this broken man who's trying to fix himself, as well as impart this on this young man. There is a lot to get. And so I understand, how you feel about that. And I agree with you, but it would be a different structure. I think it would have to be structured differently, as from a filmic point of view, and the language of cinema itself. So thank you for your comment. Bonnie?
Yes, I really enjoyed the film, but like Rachel, at the very beginning, I thought it was a little slow, but there was something, I can't even describe exactly what it was, but something compelling me to continue watching. And I was so happy that I did. And I also think, yes, it's a story of humanity, but it's a story of character, because he could have climbed over that fence and taken a dip in that pool anytime he wanted, because his young friend said, why don't you just go ahead and slip in? But he said, no, I want to wait. I want to be invited in. And that shows, to me, that shows character. He was very poor and, everything, but he could have just slipped in. But he said, no, I want to be invited in, which ultimately he was invited in.
Mm-hmm.
And now the ending, I don't know the ending. Of course, it was interesting, and I agree with what you said, but I think if I had written the film, he would have taken off his shirt and dived into that pool at the end.
Well, but he dived in before he got to that point. He was diving into the world. I mean, this is a coming of age film. It's a film about being exposed to the possibilities of what could be. So in a sense, metaphorically, he did dive in.
Metaphorically, he did.
You know, I understand how you feel, but it ain't Hollywood.
I know, I know. Yeah, I enjoyed the film.
Shelley,
Terrific.
this is
Yes.
Linda Pavar. I don't know how to put this the video on, so excuse
Oh,
me. I'm in Seattle
okay.
right now. But you know, the story, I really love the movie because the story was one not just on poverty, but it was on literacy and illiteracy. And I was wondering why the father kept sitting looking into that pool. You know, we don't know that in the very
Mhm.
beginning. That comes out much later. And then when you find that out, you realize how sad that is for the family. And yet for this young boy, as everyone has said, it's something exciting and it's maybe a future for him. And then he was so generous. You know, I don't know if it was filmed in the poor areas of the US, if people would have been that generous. You know, it all depends on the individuals. But I thought it was a beautiful picture. I love the scene with the sunflowers. The scenery was amazing. And I have friends from Goa that told me that something very bizarre. They told me that's a very wealthy area.
Yes.
So they may have just gone somewhere into the suburbs of it to find these other areas.
Well, it's basically it was really showing us the underclass to these you know, because the Nana has a beautiful house,
Right,
but this was about the class that serves, the serving
right,
class,
right.
and therefore he didn't, I don't think he wanted to show us any more opulence
No.
than he's seeing. You know, again, it's
Yeah,
controlled, and his budget was probably very low on this
right.
film. But yeah, I'm glad that somebody did inform you of that. And you know, to answer, I had a little chat there from Alice Soskin, and Alice, you're right. I didn't mention it. The music to the film was
Yeah,
very lyrical and very it sort of moved along with the action, and you know, really helped the film. But it is, you know, it's in that, it is in that ending, as I said, that really makes it all make sense. And as you said, Linda, it's about literacy or illiteracy.
right,
It's about the
right.
trap that
That's right.
illiteracy and poverty can put you in,
Right, right.
you know, and that's a universal. That's a
Well, that's
universal.
in India, though. I don't know if it still is, but it's a caste. It's kind
Well,
of like a caste system.
Yeah, they're breaking through that. I mean, in the
Yeah,
cities, they've broken through it. They're trying
yes,
to really overcome it
yes,
in many ways. We've seen films also that try to overcome it.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
Shelley,
Thank
what I
you.
was gonna say, but based it on what Linda said, is being in India, I did not, if I didn't know that it was India, if I did not know that, it would not have been something that would be in my face, because I didn't see there was anything about the caste system at all, because there was no mobility in the caste system. And yet you see, what's his name? John, the young
John Keir.
is now going to get an education and go. Now, I don't know what caste he was in, but he might not have been the untouchable, but he might have been. And here he has the same ability because of education to ascend to whatever he wants to be.
Right, right,
It's not the India of the caste system where, you know, if you see one of those that you know you're never going to get out of your caste. So I think
right,
this was lovely.
Yeah, I mean, they both came from the same basic area. They both came from a very rural area. You
That
know,
could be
where
anywhere. But that was universal. You could
yeah,
come from the Appalachians, you could come
exactly.
from China, you could come from anywhere, right? And
Mhm.
and here you could go look at, well, I'm not gonna say it. You could come from anywhere and become very high up on the political stream.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, there you would, in India, you wouldn't find that, but seeing that movie, it's a possibility.
Yes, yes. Oh, and by the way, I also Alice asked if the pool, in essence, is a MacGuffin. The answer is no, Alice. It's a metaphor. It's not. It has to do with the plot. A MacGuffin usually is a device that really has nothing to do with what's going on, but brings us into the film. Even though the pool is a device in a way, but it becomes a metaphor for the idea of the water itself, what the pool represents. So it's really much more of a metaphorical device in the film. But thank you for asking. And Jackie, once again, you.
No, I was just gonna say exactly the same thing. I didn't know if you saw Ed's question, and so I was gonna say, did you see Ed's question? And what's a MacGuffin? So you did
MacGuffin
see
was
it and you
something
answered.
and a MacGuffin is something that Alfred Hitchcock really sort of coined. For him, it was a character. MacGuffin was a character that would appear in the film, and he really doesn't seem to have anything to do with the story at all. But he's a device to get us into the story. In the best one to use as an example is you've seen North by Northwest, with Cary Grant, a great film. The MacGuffin is really Mr. Kaplan. There is no Mr. Kaplan. And it's really, it becomes a device to get the whole story rolling, because in the hotel they go, Mr. Kaplan, and he answers the thing, they're asking for him, and he answers the telegram, whatever it is. And the next thing you know, he's getting kidnapped, and then the story really takes off. So that's the idea of the MacGuffin. But when you look at Hitchcock films, you'll see sometimes he uses devices to get us in, and then you're wondering, well, what happened to that? It's gone. And really has nothing to do with the whole plot itself. It just initiates it. It just helps to initiate it. So great. I'm glad you asked that question. Thank you. Anybody else?
Was Marilyn referring to Vance?
To who?
Vance.
I'm not going to answer that question.
Yeah.
Well, he did write a book. I mean, it was biographical. Autobiographical.
Linda, but I'm not going there.
Yeah. Jackie, no. Yeah.
You can always tell when I don't understand what's going on, can't you? It's like, what?
No, I think what she was saying was Marilyn referring to Vance, and I'm like,
well, he came from poverty, supposedly,
yes.
From the area we were speaking about, and look where he got. He's bright. I don't know if
but look
somebody
what
could have
happened
done
to
that.
him along the way.
What I was saying, Jackie, that in this movie, even though it was India, you could see the friend that was going off to school could get anywhere.
Yes.
It's not like the old caste system,
right,
where he couldn't do that. From this film, he could.
right.
Yeah, I mean, right. Here in this country, we don't have a caste system. You have the opportunity if you're smart enough.
But you do have a class system. You have it in the United States. And in that movie, there was not a caste system, but there was definitely a class differentiation.
Yes.
Yeah, well, the caste system wasn't noticeable. It's there, but it's not noticeable. In other words, we're so focused on them and his relationship with Nana, and Nana is a good man. So he would overlook the fact of wherever he came from.
See, now
it's more flexible.
I saw the class also when the three friends were eating and they were bringing her chai and samosas. They wanted all the fried food, but she wanted the fruit.
Yeah, well, she was a skinny teenage girl. She didn't want to gain weight.
Yeah, but they don't, she obviously, anyways, to me, it got that she lived at a different level.
Yeah. Oh, yes. She definitely lived at a different level. I mean, she was, the contrast is very clear because the first time we see her, she's reading a book. She's reading.
But even so, compared to them, they were illiterate, and she was only focus on reading.
Right.
That was a big
Exactly.
void there also.
Yeah, but there's right away, you've got a contrast of these characters, you know, and the fact that she's, you know, a little more, you know, she's a little closer in age to herself, to her age group, whereas Venkatesh is still not there. I mean, his best friend is an 11-year-old boy, and the two of them really think alike because they're not educated enough.
I found that him being 11, well, it was reversed. The 11 could have been 18 and the 18 could have been the 11.
The way he was talking, yes. I mean, he was a little wise guy, which was added that sense of humor to the film. He was very funny.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Anybody else have anything else to like to add? Yeah, Linda.
Well, you did have the contrast with the father's behavior, though. He was so impatient, you know, with his daughter and all, but yet he was wise to, I never could remember their names, but anyway, he was wise to him sitting up there in the tree, and he knew he
Yes.
didn't work at that place. I mean, he caught on to him right away, but then he made the choice to be kind, you know,
Yeah.
to let him
Yeah.
know, but he never confronted him or anything. And he put up with the constant chatter, you know, when he kept trying to draw him, you know, out and everything. And then he, you know, so he grew a lot in his character too, but I was impressed on the healing that was occurring there.
Yeah, well, that's exactly, you're exactly right, because he was
So it's
lost
the
in
only, yeah, the only clue
was-
that we got why he and his daughter had such an adversarial relationship was I assume she was the older child that was supposed to watch the younger one. I don't know what
Right.
other, you know, thing we could have been referring to other than that. And so he just had a hard time forgiving her, even though she was just a child herself.
Yeah, I mean,
So
she felt the guilt over his death, but he felt the guilt also of leaving her in charge of him at such a young age. So
Mhm.
all of this, you know, it just was compounded. He was living in an abyss of his own. She was
Mhm.
living in a guilt-ridden situation, and they all had to heal. Now, she was the only one, you know, at the end of the story that still needed to undergo a lot more healing. Because she still didn't forgive him. Not that she had to forgive him, but you know, and there's still a way to go between the two of them. You know, realistically. There is that component in the story. It ends on, there is ambiguity. You know, there's ambiguity filled with hope, is basically the way this film.
Yeah, they didn't give a
itself.
pat ending, you know. Sometimes they wrap up too much, you know. So I thought it was a good amount of solving to give you something but leave you guessing too.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay, yeah, Alice.
Nana gave the older boy a talk about giving something as a gift so that he could learn how good it feels. And when you think about the end of the film, he gave the gift.
Yes.
The education to the boy.
Well, he gave a gift. If you remember what Nana said, and I mentioned that, is that it's the 100 rupee story, is that if you give something, you will get something in return. You know, you can't demand it. It will come to you because of the way you give it. And by giving Jank here the ability to get the education, he's going to get the gift too. Because as I said, Jank here is going to go to day school, and then he's going to come home and teach Venkatesh as well. So, you know, the self-sacrifice that he's doing will pay off. Pay off. Yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful thought. If only the world operated that way.
That's for sure.
Yes. Thank you, Alice. Okay. So now we get to next month. Yes, November 7th. November 7th, an auspicious date, right after the election. We're going to see a French film. It's entitled Between Two Worlds. And it is it is about an author, a woman author. Her name is Marion Winkler. She goes undercover to investigate the exploitation of the working class in northern France. She eventually lands a job, but as she learns more about the plight of these workers, her struggles with a deception towards them, and tries to rationalize that it's for the greater good, as you'll see. It's a very well done film, and it stars as Marianne Winkler, Juliette Binoche stars in the film, and she gives another great piece of acting, definitely worth seeing. The film is very interesting on many levels, again, dealing with sort of this underclass in society, this serving class, and it's again a universal story, a very universal story. So I will look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks for Between Two Worlds. In the
Thank you.
meantime,
Right.
enjoy.
much.
Remember to vote. Remember to vote. If you haven't already voted, get out there and vote. And
There's
I
a
won't
big
even tell
crowd
you how to vote.
so.
I will expect you'll vote the right way. Okay.
Good night.
Good night.